For Jurassic World, Legacy Effects created a number of practical effects. Some were created to dovetail with the digital work of ILM, and some of them were standalone pieces. One of our favorites that we did, which went straight from the shop to the screen, was the dying Apatosaurus. The idea was to build the head and the neck that would be animatronic and could react with the two actors, and then ILM would extend it. We wanted to make you feel for this character, and so that became our challenge. We start out with a 3D design. This is milled out of foam. That milled piece then is cleaned up by sculptors, and I mean clean up, you get all of the edges and rough texture that comes from the milling, and detail it up.
You're kind of taking it a little bit further than what's in the design. To me, the best design is always a vague design. It's up to artistic interpretation. Like any kind of reptile, I think about where does it move the most? Is that going to be wrinklier skin? Is it going to be tougher skin?
Steven Spielberg, conferred with Colin. It needs to be bigger.
The order came down that we wanted to go for a rescale. We get 3D scanning involved, we scan what the artist traditionally sculpted, and then at that point, once it's in the computer, we can then go to any scale that's needed. So instead of starting over, we were able to save a lot of man-hours.
Once that's completed, it goes to the mold department.
You want to talk to the artist, you want to talk to mechanics, and then start breaking it down, which means how am I going to split this sculpture up into workable mold pieces that we can use to create the creature. We mold the sculpture by laminating multiple layers of fiberglass cloth with an epoxy resin. Once the mold is done, we have two halves, and now we have to core it. So we take clay and we lay that clay into the mold. We fiberglass inside of that clay. And what that does is create a void in between those two pieces of how thick the skin will be in those various areas.
It's made with old-fashioned foam rubber, which has been around since the Wizard of Oz. Different formulas, but it just works well.
Basically, you're whipping air into the latex. The more air that we put into the foam latex, the softer it is, and this was an animatronic skin, so we needed super soft foam in the face. And for the neck, we needed something a little bit more durable. We inject from the bottom, and the foam's gonna rise. We put bleeder holes every couple of feet so we can see where we're at as far as material goes. Let that gel, move it to the big oven, cook it for 12 hours overnight, and the next morning we have a dinosaur.
While all of the artistic work is being done, inside the team are building the mechanics.
In this particular build, we actually went back to the early days when we did the first Jurassic Park. We went with a cable system instead of hydraulics, and had to counterweight it with springs. Inside, we used a series of what we call reverse parallelograms, and each stage would move up or side to side. And over the course of that long neck, it allowed for a gradual move.
We recreated the core of the neck sculpture in foam, cleaned out the center of it so that the mechanics could be within that. Then we covered that portion in spandex so that it would slide on the foam latex skin.
With the head, as all creatures we build, we try to get as close as we can with our limitations of how many servos and motors we can fit inside of it.
And I've asked for this thing to do the world, all kinds of muscles moving.
Just throwing everything that we have.
You're getting blinks and eye movement. It can snort and it actually blows air.
We had a series of 3 bladders going through the throat to replicate kind of a swallowing mechanism. Subtle, but it's effective.
Everything that you can possibly weave into this creature to give it that emotional feeling and make it act, and make it perform, to become a character, not just an animatronic thing. To really breathe life into it.
I think they wanted a human quality in the eye so you could associate with it easier. And so I tried to give as much depth to it as I could, one little striation at a time. I mean, it's big, it's a 3-inch diameter eyeball, and so when the camera's tight on it, I wanted to be able to see as much depth and detail as you could.
When we paint foam latex, we paint with a rubber cement-based paint. So you can get some really realistic effects by all these different layers going on top of each other.
We used a lot of rhinoceros and elephant reference because it was in that zone. It's a big, fleshy animal with wrinkles that are similar.
We start mapping in big areas using automotive spray guns. Once we get into the fine detail work, we go to airbrushes, and those go away eventually, and it's into brushes, and then those get into fine brushes, and then it's little dots and little kind of cracks.
The artists bounce and reflect off each other as the paint job happens. It keeps the talent pool alive and active.
That team, myself and the artists and the mechanics, come together and start rehearsing and practicing. and figuring out, what would this thing be doing?
Then it can just sit there.
We always use the analogy, it's like a band playing. Everybody's playing a different instrument, but it all sounds like one piece of music. That's essentially what we have to do as puppeteers. You have to have some thread that goes through everybody that keeps it all together.
We shot a rehearsal, which we shared with the producers and the director. And I think it became reassuring to them how emotional the scene could be.
We had to be able to react to any kind of emotion or any kind of thing the director asked for. We had 2 actors that were holding it.
It was really nice to see they were excited to touch, see, feel.
Because, I mean, it would actually move their arms, move their bodies.
There's some chemistry that happens, you know, between the actors in the piece. It just starts to naturally gel. I have to say, Colin Trevorrow, our director, really fought to have animatronic dinosaurs be part of this film. It's a warm feeling I have for these movies. We have a long history with them. From the Stan Winston studio. And then we're carrying on all of that here at Legacy, and we have a fantastic team of artists, and to be involved again in the Jurassic movie is quite an honor.